Hello, 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 everyone. Welcome back to the show. My name is Dan Hafner. Got another cool guest for you guys today. We're going to talk about the world of sales. Sales can be kind of a weird thing for some people. It can be also a life-changing type of topic where you can make life-changing money. It's a lot of people kind of have a love-hate relationship, kind of like technology in some ways with sales. So we're going to kind of dive into that topic. We're going to talk a little bit more about that with my guest Steve here. I'm going to bring on in 1 minute. But before I do that, as always, please like, subscribe, share the show if you find value out of it, or you just enjoy it, or you think someone would find value in this episode or the show topic at large. We always appreciate that. So, with that being said, welcome in Steve Wallace. He is the chief revenue officer of a platform called Maverick app, which is actually a prospecting tool. I'm gonna let him explain a little bit more about that, which is a very interesting platform we're going to talk about, and it'll kind of lead into this topic of sales and prospecting and all this other stuff. So welcome to the show, Steve.
Thanks, Dan. This is awesome. Really happy to be here and share some ideas with you guys.
Yeah, absolutely. So tell us, without selling us anything, tell us
Yeah.
tell us your background. How did you get into the world of sales? Kind of how did you get into Maverick app? Kind of what's your background on it?
Yeah. So this is actually kind of I call it the joke I use is this is a Marvel Genesis story, and it could be a 2 hour story if I let it. So I'm going to try to give you a short
Yeah.
version of it, right? Um, I cut my teeth in the insurance space, Dan. And a lot of insurance agencies and insurance shops put the full sales cycle on the shoulders of their agents and the advisors. And I mean everything, Dan. So I needed to know who I was going to reach out to. I was a 20 something broke kid at the time, and so was my natural market. So it wasn't like I could reach out to everybody in my market and say, hey, you need to buy life insurance. They laughed at me. They would say, why? I don't have obligations. I don't have kids. And even if I did, I don't have money to pay you. Right.
Yeah.
So I would, I was immediately faced with this problem that I needed to get in front of a new audience of people. And if you see where this is going, right? I had to follow that train of thought into how to make calls, how to go door knocking, how to introduce myself to that new audience of people. So next thing you know, I was picking up the phone and talking to anybody with a pulse, right? I was going up and down Main Street, knocking on doors, introducing myself to business owners. And it wasn't like I had it all figured out. As a matter of fact, I didn't, right? My script sucked. I didn't know how to close. I was barely licensed. Like I just got licensed. And so I didn't know how to really sell. I just knew how to talk with people. And there's a difference.
Yeah.
But I did well, which is an element of prospecting. It's just consistent effort. And that I had down. And so fast forward, I changed my agency multiple times. And in the insurance space, you don't reach out to pre-existing clients unless they reach out to you. I took that very seriously, right? Some people with a background who might listen to this show might say, well, yeah, there's caveats. I get it. I'm not making excuses. I'm just trying to keep the story simple. So every time I changed agencies, I had to reset my book of business from scratch. So I had to get better and better and better at introducing myself to new people. Fast forward about 10 years, I'm the chief revenue officer of Maverick app because I think just leaning on all those experiences on how to communicate with people, how to set meetings with people, how to support them and offer help, which is I think is the most important value that a salesperson can bring to the table is helping somebody. That transitioned and connected me into the role that I'm in now.
Yeah, that's you bring up a lot of good points. So I think a lot of us kind of run into that sometimes when we're launching a new product, or like we talk with a lot of SaaS owners on here, app owners, things like that. So you are going into a new market usually. Now, have you found more success in kind of doing that? It's almost like, they talk about it in the world of, I come from the world of cybersecurity too, like spear fishing, like kind of you're like
Sure.
spear fishing or casting a wide net, because ultimately sales is people, it's just connecting with people either face to face or like we're doing on Zoom or things like that. So it seems like to me you kind of have a lot more of a people first focus. Is that correct?
Absolutely. And I think that this is something that is coming full circle, especially in SaaS, IT, cybersecurity. I sold a bunch of cybersecurity back in the day in another life. And at the core of every one of those purchases, I remember how those conversations started. I remember how the sale started. and it had nothing to do with cybersecurity, IT, or insurance. It was just, hey, Dan, meet Steve. Steve, meet Dan, right? Which is, that sounds like an introduction. It was an introduction that I made happen with a cold call or with reaching out or LinkedIn or knocking on a door. Yeah, there has to be the know, like, and trust factor, which can be reduced down to one word, which is a relationship.
Yeah. Yeah. So let me ask you this. Why do you think, at least from the like I we were talking about before we hit record, like I came from a little bit of world of sales. I wasn't super big into it, but I did some of it here and there. I found out through a couple of trials and errors in this world that I didn't I didn't really succeed all that well. Like I had kind of ups and downs, probably like a lot of people in different sales things.
Yep. Pretty
Um,
normal.
why do you think what's the one of the biggest things that you see people struggle with when they're either new to sales or they are struggling in it? Like why do you think people like fail to continue to succeed in it? Because like from what I've seen and where I've been, it's like you have the super success. It's like the 80-20 rule. It's like there's the super
Right.
successful people, and then there's people that don't make anything, right? So
Right.
what do
Right.
you see are like the common threads there?
Yeah, well, different answers here. But I think the new sales rep, right? And I think that sales rep title can be given to multiple people in a lot of different industries. Maybe it's not called that in the industry you're in, but if you're in sales, then you're the sales rep. And for a new sales rep, I see a couple different things that stop them from being successful. One, and this really drives me nuts, is they're being taught sales by somebody who never sold.
Mm,
Okay. Like you should be taught sales by somebody who has had their teeth kicked in, has failed forward, has learned what works for them, has learned what doesn't work for them, and likewise for other people, and can communicate that to you. That's called a conscious competent. They know what made them successful, they can quantify it, and they can teach it. A lot of organizations have people in roles that cannot teach sales. What they do at Dan is they go, "Hey Dan, go talk to people." Thanks, right? Like how
yeah.
helpful is that? Go talk to people, go position your product. Yeah, but we need tactical advice. What do I say? When do I say it? How do I create the need, right? That's lacking a lot of the time, which is a secondary point, is the actual tactical advice is missing. I hear all the time that people are told to go do something that they conceptually agree with, like go talk to people or go pick up the phone or go send emails, but they don't know what to say. So there's a gap that needs to be bridged there. The second thing that I see a lot of the time, and this is no fault finding, right? I've been there myself. I've been a failed salesperson before, so I get it. But the second thing is not actually executing. Sales is an incredibly tactical field. You have to go do the work and you have to be open to getting your teeth kicked in and falling down and getting rejected. And it can be very emotional for a lot of people. Or if you hold yourself to this incredibly high standard that not hitting it drives you crazy, you're stuck in this weird spot. Can't stand failure or can't stand not hitting goals. It's like you kind of have to be just dumb enough to fit in between these two thresholds, right? And so lack of tactical execution stops success. And the third point, to button all this up and tie it off with a bow, you mentioned what separates the people who are making a lot of money and then the average, right? Or the not so great. Once you get to a certain point, it's actually less tactical and what to say, it's more skill. You learn small skills that compound over time, like a thing like
Mm,
multi-thread. You shouldn't be communicating, if you're in B2B sales, you shouldn't be communicating just with your lead. You should be communicating with your lead's manager, the person who manages the person who manages, right? Multiple layers so that everybody's on the same page, and it'll shorten your sales cycles, resulting in more sales being closed in a shorter period of time. So
makes sense.
just a few points to answer, I would say a loaded question.
No, yeah, I have a lot of those. I tend to
Yeah,
go
it's
very,
good.
very broad sometimes.
No, that's
Um,
good.
no, you brought up a very good point. And I told you this before we hit record too, is I found myself a lot of times just lacking that execution. Like I could be given all the scripts in the world. I could be given really good training from somebody who did kind of have go through the school of hard knocks or things like that. Um, but it was almost like a mindset thing, and I think that's um especially like when you're in that startup mode, and this is not just for people in sales organizations, but like as a entrepreneur startup, like if you're the person starting something up, um there is this, is there like like a certain point where you kind of learn to just be like, okay, I know what I have to do, and I've kind of intuitively got it, and now I can kind of just go? Or is there just like is that kind of a gift that people just kind of are born with?
I can't I can't speak to the full answer. I'm sure there are people who are gifted and can just do this.
Yeah.
But but I think the answer comes down to getting to a point where you just don't give a crap anymore.
Yeah.
Not about the job. There are people who care passionately about their job and want to perform well and provide. I'm not saying don't care about that. I mean, they are able to detach themselves from the outcome of any kind of professional action.
Yes, and
All
that's
they
where I
think,
was going to go with that before. Yeah,
yeah,
once I learned to detach from, okay, I have to make this sale, and when it goes and it doesn't work, there's so many high pressure, that becomes such a high pressure thing for you as the
yeah, yeah,
salesperson, and then you don't get the sale, and then you're down about yourself, and then you beat yourself up, and that's just a
right,
spiral down.
right.
And I think once you really learn to detach yourself from that, and I think this happens in the technology world, we attach, we're like, everyone I talk to is like, the thing I have is the next world changing thing, and I'm like,
Yeah,
well, it might be, probably isn't, but it might, it might be cool. So detaching from that is very key. I didn't mean to interrupt you, but that
no,
really, that reminded
it's
me of that.
okay. It's huge, and I have an additional perspective for you, for those of you looking for advice on how to tackle this right away. When you have a sales meeting, assume the person you're meeting, assume the prospect is not the right fit for you. Go into
Mm.
that meeting thinking they can't buy from me. It You're still attached to the outcome, but you're attached to a negative outcome, and your persona, I'm not talking about being a negative jerk, but your persona, the way you demonstrate, it's all more calm. It's all more detached because you're expecting them not to buy it.
It's
And
so
therefore,
interesting around like
right?
the opposite of like assume the sale, you
Right.
know? Hmm.
Yes. And when you can, it's really interesting when you pull it away from them and say you can't have this. I'm paraphrasing, but when you say you can't have this, Dan, they want it more.
Hmm. It's like the
So
dating game.
kind of.
It's like when you were younger and you were like, well, I'm not really available. Then like all of a sudden, people are like, I'm kind of interested now.
Right, right, right. And I'll
Interesting.
give you an example, and I'm talking about Maverick app, but Maverick app quite literally is not for everybody. We made the mistake of thinking a lot of people, almost everybody could use it, and we were dead wrong. We've learned from experience that it is not for everybody. For the people that it is for, it is 10 times better than anything else out there. And I say that with confidence. But for the people it's not for, which is a majority of people, it is worse than anything you'll get.
So
Right.
who is it for? Who is it for?
Yeah, sales hunters, meaning the people
Oh.
who are responsible for the whole sales cycle. They need to wake up and have a new list of people to reach out to. They need to do the work of actually reaching out to them. We're an email platform, but they should be doing this anyway. So they need to be picking up the phone and calling the list that they find. So they've spent hours building a list, or trying, or either paying a lot of money to have a list built for them. And then they need to do the work of doing outreach or paying someone to do outreach. Either way, it's time or money. So you got to choose one way or the other, right? So what Maverick app does is automate the time consuming components of full sales cycle, list building, outreach, following up, all these things that need to be done with consistency. And if you're not doing those things, then you'll think that we're something we're not.
Yeah.
And if we're thought of as something that we're not, then what are we being thought of?
It's a very good question. Very good question.
Right?
Yeah. So for those of you just listening, if you want to watch this on YouTube or wherever we're putting this up, I'm sharing the screen and kind of showing the Maverick app pages right here. So this is very, very interesting, and I really like the way you position it to just like what you said. It's not for everyone because a lot of people could say like, hey, like use something like HubSpot.
Yep.
It's branded almost as the CRM for everyone, right?
Right.
So it's a very
Great
interesting,
tool.
yeah, it's a very interesting position for you guys to take to say like, actually, no, this is not for everyone, you know.
Right. Yep.
So
Yep.
so how did this so like what how did this come to be? How did Maverick app come to be? Like, what was the differentiator between? It's not just for everyone, but like, what else is a differentiator of it?
Right. So, how it came to be, again, the Marvel Genesis story is our CEO and founder was running sales teams, and he was the one giving the advice to the team that they should, hey, go build a list, hey, go call people, hey, follow up, right? And interestingly enough, what happened was, the hunters, the one who did the work, they would go do those things, and then they'd come back to him a month later for their monthly meeting and their performance review, and they would tell my CEO, and I would likewise witness this on our end now that we're doing the same thing. And they say, hey, I had a really good month because I did what you told me to do, but now I've got so many meetings, I'm concerned about my pipeline next month. I don't have
Mm,
time to do those things. So what happened for most of them is their commissions and likewise company revenue went up, but their next month of pipeline is empty, and therefore their commissions will go down.
that's a very common thing in the startup world
Right,
or freelance world or
exactly.
whatever. Yeah,
Right.
agency world.
So this is the real problem we're solving, is making your revenue consistent across the board and growing consistently across the board.
There's our guy.
There's me.
No, that's you bring up a very excuse me, a very good point. And I found myself in that trap. I'll be very, very
Hmm,
transparent with you. Like I found myself in that trap a couple of years ago where it was like, you could hustle, you could grind, you like, okay, great. We got 15 new clients. And
right,
now being a solo operator, a small operator with some outsourced people, I was like, you get so focused over here on the fulfillment of what you sold that
right,
then okay, now you hustle through that, you get that done. Now you go back and you're like, oh shit, I don't have any new leads. I don't know where my next sale is going to come from. And
right,
that's this roller coaster up and down type of
right.
thing. I think about when I was at one of my jobs, one of the required reading I got was Fanatical Prospecting.
Yeah, Jeb Blunt.
Very,
Yeah.
very, very
Yep.
good book. Highly, highly recommend. I don't know if you recommend it as well, but
Oh,
um,
absolutely. It's one of my top five.
yeah, yeah, because that really changed my mind around like, wow, like the amount of sheer just consistent work that you need to do to make sure that you always have something in the pipeline
Right.
is something a lot of people just underestimate, just straight up, you know.
Well said. Really, really well said. And I'll further plug Jeb and say that a lot of what's in fanatical prospecting turned me into what I would call a world-class opener. I'm not saying I can't close,
Mm,
but I definitely did not have the opening skills. And a lot of the stuff in his books turned me into a world-class opener.
interesting,
Yeah.
interesting. Any other books that are in your top five that you recommend?
Oh, you have to read Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss.
I've heard of that one. I've never read it, but I've heard of that one. Yeah.
It's a masterclass in negotiation. I know that masterclass has this modern buzzword feel to it because everybody has their own masterclass now. But the book really, really is a fun read because there's stories about his experience in the FBI, but then how he applied his lessons learned in the FBI to his business negotiations. And there's every time you read it, you'll get a couple of different takeaways. So
Hmm.
read it once a year, apply what you've learned, and watch as I think negotiation has this, to me anyway, it means this back and forth conversation where you're trying to pull a result from them and they're trying to get a result from you. It doesn't have to be that way. Negotiation can simply be the words you say to elicit responses, right? When a response was lacking and you need one.
Yeah.
And so the book helps a lot with that.
Very cool. Yeah. Speaking of Chris Voss, we've been, I believe he's actually on Podmatch. I've been trying to get on his show for a while. He's got a very, very successful show.
Sure does.
So
Sure
that
does.
very,
Yeah.
very cool. Very cool. By the way, I did see something when I was scrolling through there that you guys actually do have like a white label version of this.
Yeah,
like
we
Maverick?
can build out an agency subscription for you.
Very, very interesting. Might have to
Yeah.
talk about. So that would be for an agency who offers lead gen or a sales CRM or something like that.
Yep, there's a lot of different
Wow.
ways that we can do it, but I would say the most common ways are a marketing agency. They're doing web dev, SEO, like the complete opposite of what we're doing. But they want to find a way to help the prospects that have come to them who are looking for more sales solutions, right? And they can work with us to enable that with a turnkey solution. Just turn it on, watch it go. The other opportunity is with like a fractional sales team where they're doing the stuff that Maverick app automates and they want to do it for multiple clients.
Hmm. Fractional sales teams. That's cool. I've
Yeah.
heard a lot about like the fractional CFOs or CTOs or things like that, but fractional sales teams, that's interesting. I like
There's
that
not a
idea.
ton out there, but when you find one, they're definitely worth checking out.
Hmm. Very interesting.
Mm,
Um, okay, so very interesting. What else do you have to share with us around this world of I mean, actually, one thing I'll change my question. One thing I
sure.
do like to ask some people, and I think you'd be a very good candidate for this question, is what was one of the biggest flops you've ever had, or like the biggest failure stories? I like to humble people sometimes.
Oh yeah,
So
sure.
let's
Yeah.
let's let's hear let's hear one of those.
One of the biggest, so I'll be the first person to tell you I'm a walking personification of failure, right?
Hmm.
So yeah, no problem. It actually goes back a ways. I don't believe in real failure. I believe in fail forward, but it goes back a ways. I mentioned in the beginning, and it wasn't relevant then, it is now, that I come from the insurance space, right? And I was really darn good at just talking with people. I can't emphasize that enough. I'm not trying to sound cocky, but I would just talk with people. And through relationship building, they would decide they'd want to work with me. And before you know it, Dan, I'm like 18 months in, and I stumble into a couple of two or three opportunities with whales, big, big, big money clients. The kinds of commissions that if I closed it, that's the key. If I closed it, would cover my bills for the whole year per client, right? Just pretty big.
Yeah.
And this is both a lesson in personal responsibility, but also failure, I would say. Um, I didn't have the sales skills, as I mentioned. I didn't know how to consultatively sell. I barely knew the products. And so when I brought the opportunity to my management team at the agency I was in, they responded by saying, "Hey, Steve, we're ready to work with you to get this closed, but you got to let us know when this is real. Let me know when it's real," is the exact response I got. And
Hmm.
therein lies the problem. I didn't have the confidence to realize that I had got it as far as I could. I was troubled because they wouldn't step in until I took a step, but didn't have the technical knowledge or consultative selling skills to take it one step further with the prospect. And what ended up happening was I chased them instead of letting them come to me. I forgot about all the singles and doubles that got me to a successful position in the first place. I went broke. My car was repossessed. I skipped Christmas one year because I was too depressed to let them know that I had effectively failed out of the industry. And
Been
I
there.
think the less, yeah, man, I mean, just brutal, brutal. I told them I was sick, and that's why I couldn't make Christmas. No, I
Yeah.
was just too embarrassed.
Yeah. Been there.
So the net of this story is I pulled myself up on my bootstraps. It took about 18 months to really get my life back together and put myself on a more positive path. I'm self-taught in sales as a result of that experience. So I can't say that it was a horrible one, but man, it felt like it back then. And the lesson for me is I should have known, hey, go to a different agency where you're going to get support.
Hmm. Well, as long as you had a good takeaway like that, that's a very
Okay.
good story. I appreciate you telling that.
Of
I
course.
was in a very similar situation around Christmas and all that kind of stuff too.
Oh
So
wow.
like I love talking with people with you like that like, good for you that you were able to do that and go through that and kind of pull yourself back up by those bootstraps and stuff. So good on you, man. That's really cool to hear.
Thanks.
Really cool to
It's
hear.
easier to say now, but back then it was really tough to talk about back then.
Yeah, because I mean, nobody talks about that on social media. Nobody wants to like
Right.
that's kind of the problem with it, is like everyone just shares the highlight reel, but it's hard to like share, hey, yeah, the reason I'm skipping Christmas this year is because I failed in my business and I'm not actually sick, but it's just terrible and I have no money. Like,
Right.
no, you know what I mean? Like that's tough. That's very
Yep.
tough.
Yep.
Um,
Yep.
but
Exactly.
it's such a world where like, especially with all the things that are happening in this, with this AI boom and just the way that the internet's taking over things, like it's so, and this is just my opinion. You can correct me if I'm wrong, but is it easier today to find success at a higher level faster than ever before, or is that just a myth still?
I'm actually this is a topic that's top of mind for me right now. I'm still chewing on that answer, Dan.
Hmm.
Um, I I hear this a lot, especially on LinkedIn and social media platforms, that AI won't replace a person. It will replace a person who doesn't use AI.
Hmm.
And that may be true. I think it's true, but I haven't had a chance to really flesh out that example because what I'm seeing from my own experience and others is that now people are spending all the time that AI is saving them on learning how to prompt and build AI. So I don't know that the outcomes are actually all that much better yet. And so for that reason, I don't know if the answer is so clear, right?
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. I've had a couple of conversations recently where I've changed my tune a little bit thanks to these conversations around people
Mm.
that are a lot more knowledgeable in the area than me. And just as an umbrella, not even industry specific or anything specific. It's just some people are kind of really starting to kind of sound the alarm bells a little bit around like, yeah, we've been through this wave several times in 5 to 10 years. Like you have the people that are saying it's going to change everything in 5 to 10 years. The world's going to be completely different. And then I talked to a couple people that say, hey, in 5 to 10 years, it's going to be kind of back to normal. And the stuff that like AI should replace will. And then the rest of life will just kind of go back to the way it was. So that's been
Do,
very interesting conversations I've had recently.
do you mind if I add a little insight into the timing of sales in the
Not at
midst of
all.
this AI boom? So I think most people will agree that AI is not yet where it should be in the sense that it isn't yet selling the way a human being would,
Right.
right? Some companies have it figured out, but they've spent a lot of money on it. So for a lot of the small business owner who are looking for an AI solution, sales AI isn't there yet.
Right.
So here's the insight, the tactical, actionable insight for all of you who are listening and want to sell more or add more clients. Now is the time to do the human work. The
Mm.
barrier to entry for most of us is so low. A VP of sales or a CEO in a lot of different industries are getting less than one call a day. So the actionable insight for anybody listening is pick up the phone and make the call because you might be the only person calling that person today, especially in the small business market. Everybody's calling
Wow.
big businesses. Call small, right?
Wow.
Less than one a day. And if you do it with a human approach, build a relationship, it is amazing what the outcomes could be. And the challenge here is time is limited because I do believe that AI will have this figured out at some point. So do it now for the sake of future self.
Wow. I couldn't have said that better. I mean, that's really amazing. I did that with a new launch that I did recently with a product. I just literally called people
Yeah,
and you'd be amazed. I mean, I would be talking with people for a half hour and I'm like, well, I
right.
didn't really have the time to do it, but hey, whatever, you know? And
Yeah,
if nothing else, it's good market research. That's one thing I really learned is when I was
100%.
very approachable and just very like I kind of positioned them as the expert instead of me to say like,
Mm,
hey, I have this idea that we're getting ready to launch and we are just kind of curious for your feedback. And that
right.
completely lowered a barrier. I think I'm probably like you. I'm probably a little bit better of an opener than sometimes a closer.
Sure.
But
Gotta have opens, man. You gotta have
you
opens.
got to have
Close something
opens.
that hasn't been opened.
You got to have opens. I remember actually, and just as a side note, I remember when I was
Sure.
at one of my sales jobs, I there was always like it was just like, hey, make 100 calls a day, make 100 calls a day.
Yeah.
And I was less concerned with that because at the end of every day, I might not have hit that 100 call mark, but it would log our call time. And I was always number one, if not number two on that list every single
Yeah,
day,
that's it.
because
Right there.
it was like just learning how to approach and to talk and to open people up and to have that human approach instead of just being like, hey, my name's Dan, I'm going to say this. You know what I mean? It was that was I took a lot of pride in that, actually, that I could spend time on the phone with people.
You should.
um yeah, and that was really cool. So yeah, anyway, that's just a side silly note for me. But
Sure.
no, this was really, really cool, really interesting interview, really I think very insightful, very useful for things. um so thank you very much,
Thank
Steve, for
you.
coming on. Really appreciate it, man. So where can we go to find more about you or connect with you?
Sure. I'm most active on LinkedIn. Steve Wallace, the Chief Sales Nerd, is the
Nice.
forward slash after
Love it.
the linkedin.com/users or whatever it is. Or you can email me at steve@maverickapp.io.
All right. That sounds good. So we'll put all those links in there and you guys can check out the Maverick app. See if it's something that's for you. As we mentioned, it's not for everybody, but if it is for you, then go ahead and check that out. So hope you guys got some insight from this. Hope we, just to be even a fly on the wall with this conversation, I think would be kind of fun. That's what's cool about podcasts, is you can just
I
kind of
agree.
tune in for these things. So, all right, Steve. Well, thank you so much. Really appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Like, look forward to seeing you in the future, and we'll talk soon. All right, man.
Thanks, Dan.
All right, guys, that's it for this episode. Be sure to tune in next time. We'll talk to you later.